The signal came through on a Tuesday morning, crackling across the vast emptiness of space like a whisper in a storm. Jake Morrison had been monitoring the deep space arrays from the Mars Relay Station for 3 years, and in all that time, he had never seen anything like this. The transmission was definitely artificial, definitely intelligent, and definitely not human. He called Lisa Harper over to his console, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted the frequency filters. Lisa was the best communications officer in the United Earth Space Force, and if anyone could make sense of this garbled mess of data, it was her. She leaned over his shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she watched the patterns scroll across the screen. "That is not natural," she said quietly. "Jake, that is someone trying to talk to us." It took them 6 hours to decode the message. The language was completely alien, but the mathematical foundations were universal. Whoever sent this signal understood that any intelligent species would recognize prime numbers, basic geometry, and the fundamental constants of physics. Once they had the key, the rest of the message fell into place like a puzzle solving itself. What they found made Jake's blood run cold. The message came from a species called the Kelthara. They lived 3 star systems away, in a region of space that human probes had barely touched. Their civilization was old, peaceful, and highly advanced in art and philosophy. But they were not warriors. They had never needed to be, because in their corner of the galaxy, violence on a massive scale was unthinkable. Until the Vraxin came. The Vraxin Collective was an empire built on conquest and slavery. They moved from system to system like locusts, stripping worlds of resources and crushing anyone who resisted. They had been attacking Kelthara colonies for 2 years, burning cities and taking prisoners. The Kelthara military had tried to fight back, but they were scholars and artists, forced to become soldiers overnight. They never stood a chance. Now the Kelthara homeworld itself was under siege. 400 Vraxin warships surrounded their planet, bombarding defense stations and preparing for a final invasion. The Kelthara government estimated they had 3 weeks before total collapse. Maybe less. In their desperation, they had searched through the old radio signals they had intercepted from nearby star systems. One of those systems was Earth. The signals were decades old, showing a primitive but vibrant civilization. The Kelthara thought, maybe, just maybe, these humans would offer them sanctuary, a place to hide, a chance for their children to survive. They were not asking for military help. They did not think humanity was capable of that. They just wanted someone to care that they were about to die. Jake and Lisa transmitted the decoded message up the chain of command. Within hours, it reached Admiral Karen Hughes at Earth Defense Command in Geneva. Karen was a career officer who had spent 30 years preparing humanity for the day when we would meet other intelligent life. She had written papers on first contact protocols, commanded war games against theoretical alien threats, and built the largest space navy in human history. She read the Kelthara message 3 times, then called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. The council chamber was deep underground, shielded from everything except the weight of the decision they had to make. Politicians, military leaders, and scientific advisors filled the room. Everyone had read the message. Everyone understood what it meant. "We cannot ignore this," Karen said, standing at the head of the table. "We have confirmation of intelligent alien life, and they are being exterminated as we speak. The question is not whether we respond. The question is how." The debate lasted 4 hours. Some argued for sending diplomats, for trying to negotiate with the Vraxin. Others suggested offering the Kelthara refuge on one of humanity's colony worlds. A few advocated for doing nothing at all, saying Earth should not involve itself in alien wars. Then Daniel Cross stood up. Daniel was the chief military strategist, a man who thought about threats the way chess masters thought about endgames. He activated a holographic display showing the region of space around Earth. "The Vraxin Collective controls 17 star systems," he said, highlighting them one by one. "They have conquered 12 different species in the last 50 years. They operate a fleet of over 3,000 warships. They expand constantly, taking new territory, enslaving populations, stripping worlds of resources. He zoomed in on Earth's solar system, then drew a line connecting it to Vraxen space. We are 4 star systems away from their border. If they finish with the Kelthara, we are next. Not today, not next year, but soon they will find us, and when they do, they will not come in peace. The room fell silent. The implications were clear. This was not just about helping aliens. This was about survival. But Karen Hughes saw it differently. She stood up and looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. Daniel is right about the threat, she said. But that is not why we should act. We should act because someone asked for help. Because innocent people are dying. Because if we have the power to stop evil and we choose not to, then what does that make us? She pulled up the final part of the Kelthara message, the part that had been haunting her since she first read it. It was a simple plea, translated into mathematical concepts and beamed across the stars with the last of their emergency power. We do not expect you to fight for us. We do not expect you to die for strangers. We only ask that you remember we existed, that our art, our music, our children meant something. Please do not let us disappear as if we never were. Karen turned off the display and looked at the council members. They asked us to remember them. I say we do better than that. I say we make sure they survive to remember themselves. Ender. 1. We are themselves. The vote was unanimous. Earth would respond to the distress call, but not with diplomats or refugee ships. They would respond with the Apex Armada, the full might of humanity's military power. Admiral Hughes addressed the United Earth Assembly the next day. Her speech was broadcast to every colony, every space station, every ship in the fleet. She spoke clearly and without hesitation. 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Every shipyard in the solar system worked day and night, building new vessels and retrofitting existing ones. The Apex Armada grew from a concept into a reality. 240 warships, representing the absolute peak of human engineering and military doctrine. The flagship was the UES Retribution, a massive battlecruiser that measured over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Admiral Karen Hughes walked its corridors with a mixture of pride and determination. This ship, this fleet, would carry humanity's message to the stars. That message was simple. The strong protect the weak, not prey upon them. Jake Morrison had been reassigned from the Mars relay station to the Retribution as a diplomatic liaison. He stood on the bridge as the fleet prepared for its first jump, watching the organized chaos of a military operation on a scale humanity had never attempted. Lisa Harper worked at the communications station, coordinating with the other ships in the fleet. Captain Ryan Brooks commanded the Vanguard from the UES Valiant, a sleek destroyer designed for speed and firepower. His tactical officer, Nicole Patterson, ran final checks on their weapon systems. They would be the first to engage the enemy, the tip of humanity's spear. The jump to Kelthara space took 3 days, broken into carefully calculated hops that allowed the fleet to maintain formation. When they finally arrived at the edge of the Kelthara system, they found exactly what they expected. 400 Vraxen warships surrounded the besieged planet, their formation loose and confident. They had been bombarding Kelthara defense stations for weeks, grinding down the last resistance. On the planet's surface, Counselor Venia watched the new arrivals appear on her sensors. She had almost given up hope that the message sent to Earth would reach anyone. When her military advisors told her that unknown ships had just entered the system, she felt a flutter of desperate optimism. Could these be the humans? Had they actually come? But there were only 240 ships against 400. What could they possibly do? The Vraxen noticed the human fleet immediately. War Commander Jetrix studied the sensor readings from his command ship with curiosity rather than concern. These vessels were unfamiliar, their design unlike anything in Vraxen records. But they were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. He ordered a communication channel opened. Unknown vessels. This is War Commander Jetrix of the Vraxin Collective. You have entered a military engagement zone. Identify yourselves and state your purpose, or be considered hostile. Admiral Hughes sat in her command chair, reading the translated message on her screen. She glanced at Jake Morrison, who stood nearby with clenched fists. The young officer had spent 6 weeks studying the Kelthara culture, learning about their art and philosophy. He had also studied the Vraxin, learning about their pattern of conquest and brutality. Admiral, we have verified targeting data. Nicole Patterson reported from the Valiant. All Vraxin vessels are locked. Weapons ready on your command. Karen considered her response carefully. This moment would define how the galaxy saw humanity. She could try diplomacy, could attempt to negotiate. But she had read the reports about Vraxin behavior. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They only understood strength. She opened a channel to the entire fleet and to all listening parties in the system. This is Admiral Karen Hughes of the United Earth Space Force. The Kelthara are under our protection. You have one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. If you fire on us, if you continue your attack on this world, we will consider it an act of war. You have 60 seconds to respond. Jetrix laughed when he heard the translation. This unknown species thought they could dictate terms while outnumbered? He gave the order his crews expected. Fire a warning barrage. Show these fools what Vraxin weapons could do. 50 Vraxin ships opened fire simultaneously, sending plasma bolts streaking across space toward the human fleet. On the Retribution, the defensive systems activated automatically. Point defense lasers intercepted the plasma bolts, detonating them harmlessly thousands of kilometers away. Not a single shot reached the human ships. Admiral Hughes waited for the light show to fade, then spoke 2 words that changed everything. Weapons free. The Apex Armada unleashed hell. Ryan Brooks watched from the Valiant as his ship's railgun batteries began firing. Tungsten penetrators, each weighing several tons, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. They crossed the distance to the Vraxin fleet in seconds, punching through shields and armor like they were made of paper. Nicole Patterson coordinated the Vanguard's attack with cold precision. Her targeting systems identified command ships, supply vessels, and communications nodes. The human doctrine was clear. Cut off the head, disrupt the supply lines, destroy their ability to coordinate. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Nuclear-pumped laser arrays fired beams of coherent light that burned through Vraxin hulls. Missile pods opened, releasing smart munitions that used their own sensor packages to track and destroy targets. Fighter squadrons launched, their pilots eager to prove that human training and reflexes gave them an edge against any enemy. The Vraxin fleet tried to respond, but they had never faced anything like this. Their weapons were designed for siege warfare, for bombarding planets, and destroying static defenses. The human ships moved with impossible coordination, their formation shifting and flowing like a living thing. Jetrix stared at his tactical display in growing horror. In the first 5 minutes, he had lost 30 ships. In 10 minutes, that number doubled. His vessels were exploding or going dead in space, their crews killed by kinetic impacts or cooked by laser fire. He tried to order a retreat, but the humans had already anticipated that. Fighter squadrons led by Brandon Cole had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. Any Vraxin ship that tried to jump to faster-than-light speeds found itself targeted by multiple fighters, their engines disabled before they could flee. On the Kelthara homeworld, Venia and her council watched the battle through their long-range sensors. They could not believe what they were seeing. The humans, the species they had hoped might offer them shelter, were systematically destroying the Vraxin siege fleet. What are they? One of her advisors whispered. How can so few ships do this? Venia had no answer. She had studied the old Earth broadcasts, the ones that showed a civilization just beginning to explore its own solar system. That had been less than 200 years ago. How had they advanced so quickly? How had they become this powerful? The battle lasted 18 minutes, from first shot to final surrender. Half the Vraxan fleet was destroyed outright, their ships reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The other half was crippled or captured, their crews either dead or begging for mercy. Admiral Hughes gave the order to cease fire. She opened a channel to the surviving Vraxan vessels and to the planet below. This system is now under Earth's protection. Any Vraxan forces that remain have one chance to leave. Take your damaged ships and go. Tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them that humanity has arrived in this region of space, and we do not tolerate aggression against peaceful civilizations. Jetrix, his ship badly damaged and half his crew dead, managed to get his engines working. He jumped away with the few ships that could still move, fleeing back toward Vraxan space. Karen then opened a channel to the Kelthara homeworld. Jake Morrison helped translate her words into concepts the Kelthara could understand. Counselor Venia, this is Admiral Hughes. We received your message. We came as quickly as we could. The immediate threat to your world has been eliminated. We would like to meet with you and discuss how Earth can help your people recover. On the planet below, Venia stood in the council chamber with tears streaming down her face. They had asked the universe for a miracle, and the universe had sent them humans. These strange, violent, compassionate beings who had traveled across the stars not to conquer but to protect. She composed herself and responded, her voice shaking with emotion. The aftermath of the battle brought a new kind of chaos. The chaos of first contact between two species who had never imagined meeting each other. Jake Morrison took a shuttle down to the Kelthara homeworld with Admiral Hughes and a small diplomatic team. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jake watched the cities pass beneath them, elegant structures that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. The Kelthara had gathered in their capital city's main plaza, thousands of them waiting to see the beings who had saved their world. When Jake stepped out of the shuttle, he got his first real look at them. They were taller than humans, with elongated limbs and large eyes that seemed to take in everything. Their skin had a faint, iridescent quality, shifting colors in the sunlight. Counselor Venia approached slowly, her movements graceful despite her obvious nervousness. Through a translation device Jake had brought, she spoke her first words to humanity. You came so far to help us. Why? We have nothing you could want. We are not warriors. We cannot repay this debt. Admiral Hughes smiled, a gesture that the translation software tried to explain to Venia through cultural context. You do not owe us anything, Karen said. Where we come from, when someone needs help, you help them. That is all the reason we need. Venia struggled to understand this concept. In her experience of the galaxy, power was something you used for gain. The strong took from the weak. That was simply how things worked. But these humans had traveled across the stars, risked their lives, and destroyed a powerful fleet just to help strangers? Over the following days, Jake worked to establish real communication with the Kelthara. He learned about their culture, their history, their art. The Kelthara were philosophers and scientists, artists and dreamers. They had never developed powerful weapons because they had never needed them. Their corner of the galaxy had been peaceful for thousands of years. Then the Vraxan had arrived, and everything changed. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Brooks and Commander Chloe Martinez began the work of fortifying the Kelthara system. Their engineering teams surveyed the damaged defense stations and shook their heads at what they found. The Kelthara defenses were designed to stop pirates, not military fleets. We need to upgrade everything, Chloe said, reviewing the technical specifications. Their weapons are 50 years behind our technology, and their shields are practically decorative. Ryan nodded, looking at the tactical map of the system. If the Vraxan come back with a larger force, we need this system to be able to hold until reinforcements arrive. Chief Engineer Kyle Stevens took charge of the construction project. His teams began building 8 new orbital defense stations, each one equipped with human weapon systems and shield generators. Nicole Patterson helped train Kelthara technical staff on how to operate and maintain the new equipment. The Kelthara learned quickly, their natural intelligence adapting to the new technology. But they struggled with human military doctrine, which emphasized aggressive defense and preemptive strikes. Their culture had no framework for this kind of thinking. One of the Kelthara scholars, a being named Pelvin, made it his mission to understand humanity. Jake gave him access to human historical archives, cultural databases, and military theory. Pelvin spent days absorbing information, trying to make sense of these strange beings. What he discovered both fascinated and terrified him. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. They had developed weapons of incredible, destructive power, then created treaties to limit their use. They had fought over territory, resources, ideology, and religion. They had committed terrible atrocities, then written laws to prevent such things from happening again. But through it all, there was a pattern. Humans helped each other. They formed alliances. They protected the weak. When disasters struck, human nations sent aid even to their enemies. When genocides occurred, human populations demanded intervention. Pelvin shared his findings with Counselor Venia, trying to explain what he had learned. They are not a peaceful species, he said carefully. But they are not a cruel one either. They have strict moral codes about when violence is acceptable. They fight to protect, not to conquer. They see themselves as having a responsibility to use their power for good. Venia absorbed this information quietly. She watched the human crews working on the defense stations, joking with each other and showing Kelthara engineers how to calibrate weapon systems. She saw Jake Morrison teaching Kelthara children about Earth, showing them images of forests and oceans and cities full of diverse human cultures. They are dangerous, she said finally. But they are dangerous in the right way, like a parent protecting their young, like a guardian standing against darkness. While the fortification work continued, disturbing news arrived from Earth's intelligence network. The Vraxen Collective was mobilizing. Long-range probes detected massive fleet movements in Vraxen space. They were gathering their forces, preparing for a counterstrike. Admiral Hughes called a conference with her senior officers. The holographic display showed Vraxen territory, with red markers indicating fleet concentrations. They are assembling approximately 1,000 ships, Karen said grimly. This is their second war fleet, the formation they use to crush major resistance. They will come here expecting to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Ryan Brooks studied the display. Can we hold against that many? If we fight defensively, yes, Chloe Martinez answered. With the new defense stations and our fleet, we can make this system extremely costly to attack. But casualties will be heavy. Jake Morrison, sitting in on the meeting, raised a question that had been bothering him. Why are they coming back? They have to know we can hurt them. Why not just cut their losses and leave us alone? Admiral Hughes pulled up intelligence reports from intercepted Vraxen communications. Pride, she said. And fear. The Vraxen rule through intimidation. If we make them look weak, their subject species might rebel. They have to defeat us to maintain their empire. This is not about the Kelthara anymore. This is about Vraxen survival as an imperial power. The human fleet spent 3 weeks preparing for the inevitable attack. They ran drills, stockpiled ammunition, and coordinated with the Kelthara defense forces. The civilian population was moved to underground shelters, ready to endure another siege. But Admiral Hughes had a different plan. She called Jake into her office one evening, when the system's sun was setting and painting the sky orange and purple. Jake, I need you to understand something, she said. What we did here, destroying that first Vraxen fleet, that was just the opening move. If we fight defensively, if we wait for them to come to us, this war will drag on for years. Millions will die on both sides. She pulled up a star chart showing the route to Vraxen space. We have one chance to end this quickly. We need to take the fight to them, hit their staging areas, disrupt their supply lines, show them that attacking Earth's allies has consequences they cannot afford. Jake looked at the chart, understanding what she was suggesting. You want to invade Vraxen territory. I want to end the threat before it grows, Karen corrected. Every day we wait, they build more ships and recruit more species to their war effort. But if we strike now, while their fleet is concentrated, we can cripple their military power in one decisive campaign. She turned to face him directly. I need you to explain this to Counselor Venia. The Kelthara need to understand that we are not just defending them. We are going to make sure the Vraxen never threaten anyone again. 2. Jake met with Venia the next day in her council chambers. He explained Admiral Hughes's plan, watching her reactions carefully. The Kelthara counselor was quiet for a long time after he finished. You would do this for us? She finally asked. Risk your ships and your people? In an offensive war? Not just for you, Jake said honestly. Intelligence reports show the Vraxen have enslaved 6 other species. They are planning to expand into more systems. If we stop them now, we save not just the Kelthara, but everyone else in their path. Venia walked to a window overlooking her city. Children played in the streets below, something that would have been impossible a month ago, when Vraxen bombardment threatened every moment. Before you came, I believed the universe was cruel, she said softly. That the strong always dominated the weak, and kindness was a luxury only the powerful could afford. You have shown me I was wrong. Kindness is not weakness. Compassion is not surrender. Sometimes, the most moral thing you can do is to fight so that others do not have to. She turned back to Jake with determination in her large eyes. The Vraxen Collective's ruling council met in their grand war chamber, a massive room carved from black stone deep beneath their homeworld's surface. 17 sector governors sat around a circular table, each one representing vast territories conquered over centuries. At the head of the table stood Supreme Commander Varthex, the architect of Vraxen expansion and the mind behind their military doctrine. Holographic displays showed the devastating defeat at Kelthara Space. The council members watched the battle footage in silence, seeing their ships torn apart by weapons they did not understand, destroyed by tactics they had never encountered. Governor Krelln was the first to speak, his voice heavy with concern. We lost 2 fleets to these humans, 400 ships at Kelthara, then another 1,000 at the second engagement. Our military strength has been cut by nearly half. Perhaps we should seek a diplomatic solution. Several other governors murmured agreement. The Vraxen had never faced an enemy who could match them ship for ship. Every species they had conquered had been technologically inferior or numerically weaker. The humans were neither. Supreme Commander Varthex slammed his fist on the table, silencing the room. You speak of diplomacy with beings who destroyed our fleets without negotiation? Who announced their protection of the Kelthara without even attempting to understand our claim to that territory? These humans are a threat not just to our expansion, but to our existence. He pulled up a tactical map showing the Vraxen Empire and the human systems. If we show weakness now, every species we have conquered will see it. They will rebel. They will resist. Our empire will collapse from within. We must respond with overwhelming force. We must show the galaxy that the Vraxen Collective cannot be challenged. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, Varthex prevailed. The Vraxen would mobilize their entire military, every available warship across their empire. They would gather at their homeworld and prepare for a final confrontation. If the humans wanted war, they would get war on a scale they could not imagine. Meanwhile, the Apex Armada moved deeper into Vraxen territory, jumping from system to system with calculated precision. Admiral Hughes had planned their route carefully, targeting Vraxen military installations and supply depots while avoiding heavily populated worlds. The humans did not come as conquerors. They came as liberators. In the Thorin system, they found a slave colony where the Vraxen had forced an amphibious species to mine rare minerals. Captain Dan Warren led the assault on the planetary defenses, while his tactical officer, Brandon Hayes, coordinated the evacuation of the slaves. The Vraxen overseers had expected the slaves to cower, to wait passively for rescue. Instead, the moment human ships appeared, the slaves rose up. They fought with mining equipment, with bare hands, with nothing but desperate courage. By the time human Marines landed, the rebellion was already in full swing. Jake Morrison went down to the surface with the first wave of support teams. He found beings covered in scars, malnourished and traumatized, but refusing to give up. They looked at the humans with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You came for us?" one of them asked, through the translation device. "But we sent no message. We did not call for help." Jake knelt beside the being, helping bandage a wound. "You did not need to call. We saw what was being done to you. That was enough." Word of humanity's actions spread across Vraxen space faster than any ship could travel. Slave species on a dozen worlds heard about the liberators from Earth who fought not for territory, but for justice. Some species began sabotaging Vraxen operations, knowing that help might actually come. Admiral Hughes received reports from intelligence officers who were monitoring Vraxen communications. The Empire was fracturing. Resources were being diverted to put down rebellions. Vraxen commanders were abandoning isolated outposts, pulling back to defend core worlds. But the news was not all good. The Vraxen were gathering their full strength at their homeworld, creating a defensive position that would be nearly impossible to assault directly. Commander Chloe Martinez brought the tactical analysis to Admiral Hughes during a strategy session. "They have 2,500 ships protecting their home system," Chloe reported. "Multiple layers of defense stations, minefields, and sensor networks. If we attack head-on, casualties could be catastrophic." Lisa Harper, now a captain with her own command aboard the UES Sovereign, studied the data. "They are expecting us to be cautious, to lay siege rather than attack. They think we will try to preserve our forces." Admiral Hughes nodded slowly, a plan forming in her mind. "Then we give them what they do not expect. We attack immediately, with everything we have, in a formation designed to maximize our technological advantages." The senior officers looked at each other. This was a high-risk strategy, betting everything on a single, decisive battle. But the alternative was a prolonged war of attrition that could last years. Ryan Brooks voiced the concern they all shared. "Admiral, if this goes wrong, we could lose the entire fleet. Earth would be defenseless." Karen met his eyes steadily. "If we do not end this now, the Vraxen will rebuild and come at us with even greater force. They will never stop expanding, never stop conquering. This is our chance to break their power permanently. I will not waste it." She pulled up communication records from the liberated slaves, testimony from species who had suffered under Vraxen rule. "We did not come this far to half-measure our response. We came to end a threat and free the oppressed. That requires commitment. That requires sacrifice." The fleet held a memorial service before the final jump. They honored the 37 ships and their crews lost in earlier engagements, reading names and remembering faces. Jake Morrison stood among the crew of the Retribution, thinking about all the lives that depended on the decisions made in the coming battle. He thought about the Kelthara children playing in their rebuilt cities. He thought about the freed slaves, learning what it meant to have hope. He thought about Earth, 4-star systems away, trusting that their military could handle threats billions of kilometers from home. The weight of it all should have been crushing. Instead, it felt right. This was what humanity was supposed to do. Not conquer, not dominate, but stand against darkness wherever it appeared. The Apex Armada made its final jump, emerging at the edge of the Vraxen home system. The entire Vraxen war fleet waited for them in defensive formation, a wall of ships designed to protect their homeworld. Supreme Commander Varthek sent a transmission to the human fleet, his voice carrying decades of military authority. "Admiral Hughes, I offer you this one chance. Withdraw now, and we will discuss terms. The Kelthara can remain under your protection. We will establish borders and maintain peace. But if you attack our homeworld, you force us to fight to the last ship. Neither of our civilizations will survive such a conflict." Rether. Admiral Hughes listened to the translation, then composed her response carefully. This would be broadcast across all frequencies, heard by every species in the region. Supreme Commander Varthex, you misunderstand our purpose. We did not come to negotiate borders or establish spheres of influence. We came because you were hurting people who could not defend themselves. You built an empire on the suffering of others, and you believed that made you strong. Now you will learn the difference between strength and cruelty. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew, at the faces of people who had volunteered to risk everything for strangers they would never meet. You asked for terms. Here are ours. Dismantle your empire. Free every enslaved species. Submit to oversight from a coalition of free worlds. To ensure you never threaten peace again. These are not negotiations. This is what will happen, either peacefully or by force. The choice is yours, but you have 60 seconds to decide. Varthex stared at his communication screen, unable to believe what he was hearing. This human admiral, outnumbered 6-1, was demanding unconditional surrender? He gave the order his pride demanded. All ships, weapons free, destroy them. The Vraxan fleet surged forward, 2,500 ships moving as one massive wall of firepower. They filled space with weapons fire, creating a storm of energy and metal designed to overwhelm any defense. Admiral Hughes watched the incoming attack with calm calculation. She had studied Vraxan tactics for months, understood their doctrine, knew their weaknesses. All ships, formation hammer, execute on my mark. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one moving with perfect coordination. The space around the Vraxan homeworld became a storm of fire and metal. 2,500 Vraxan ships fought against 400 human vessels in a battle that would determine the fate of multiple species. The scale was beyond anything humanity had ever attempted, and beyond anything the Vraxan had thought possible. Captain Ryan Brooks gripped his command chair as the UES Valiant took fire from 3 directions. His shields flared bright, absorbing energy blasts that would have vaporized a smaller ship. Nicole Patterson worked her tactical console with fierce concentration, directing return fire with precision that turned Vraxan advantages into liabilities. Target their formation nodes, Ryan ordered. Break their coordination. The human vanguard drove deep into the Vraxan center, not retreating despite overwhelming firepower. This was the critical part of Admiral Hughes's strategy. Make the enemy commit everything to stopping the center thrust, while the flanking forces did the real damage. Commander Chloe Martinez led the left flank aboard the UES Phoenix. Her formation swept around the Vraxan fleet like a scythe, targeting supply ships and command vessels. The Vraxan had concentrated their heaviest firepower forward, leaving their flanks relatively exposed. It was a mistake they would not get to learn from. All ships, focus fire on Sector 7, Chloe commanded. Break through their line and hit them from behind. Her squadron punched through the Vraxan formation, their weapons creating a gap that widened with each passing moment. Human fighters poured through the breach, attacking ships that had oriented their weapons and shields toward the front. On the right flank, Captain Lisa Harper executed the same maneuver with her squadron. The UES Sovereign led a wedge formation that carved through Vraxan defenders like they were not there. Lisa had been monitoring communications since the battle started, and she had noticed something important. Admiral, their command network is fragmenting, she reported to the Retribution. Individual commanders are making decisions without coordination. Their formation is breaking down. Admiral Hughes saw the pattern developing on her tactical display. The Vraxan fought well as individuals, but they had never faced an enemy who could threaten their command structure. Human electronic warfare teams, led by specialists aboard the Sovereign, had infiltrated the Vraxan communication network and were injecting false orders and corrupted data. Vraxan commanders received contradictory instructions. Some ships were told to advance, while others were ordered to retreat. Friendly fire incidents increased as ships misidentified targets in the chaos. Supreme Commander Varthex watched his perfect defensive formation dissolve into chaos from his command ship. He had expected the humans to fight cautiously, to preserve their smaller fleet. Instead, they attacked with reckless aggression, seeming to ignore losses as they drove toward their objectives. Except They were not ignoring losses. They were minimizing them through superior coordination and technology. For every human ship damaged, 10 Vraxan vessels were destroyed or crippled. The dreadnoughts Armageddon and Devastator demonstrated why humanity had built them. Their main weapons could engage targets at ranges where return fire was ineffective. They moved through the battlefield like predators, each shot carefully calculated to cause maximum disruption to enemy formations. Chief Weapons Officer Kyle Bennett aboard the Retribution coordinated the dreadnought's fire with the precision of a surgeon. He targeted Vraxan ammunition ships, causing secondary explosions that destroyed nearby vessels. He hit their shield generators, leaving ships vulnerable to follow-up attacks from smaller human vessels. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and horror. This was warfare on a scale he had never imagined. Ships were dying by the dozens, thousands of beings ending their existence in flashes of light and expanding debris clouds. But he also saw the purpose behind it. Every Vraxan ship destroyed was one that would never enslave another population, never burn another city, never force children to work in mines until they died. Admiral Hughes maintained her calm demeanor despite the chaos. She adjusted formations in real time, responding to Vraxan movements before they fully developed. She had spent 30 years studying warfare, preparing for this moment, and every lesson was being applied. Enemy formation is collapsing in sectors 4 and 5, her tactical officer reported. We have breached their inner defensive ring. Karen nodded. All ships, advance. Do not give them time to reorganize. The human fleet surged forward as one entity, maintaining formation even as they took fire. They had drilled for months on these maneuvers, practiced until they could execute them in their sleep. Now that training paid off in survival and victory. 4 hours into the battle, the Vraxan fleet had lost half its strength. Varthex's command ship was damaged, life support failing, engines barely functional. He watched his empire's military power evaporate before his eyes, unable to comprehend how it had happened so quickly. He opened a channel to Admiral Hughes, his voice desperate now rather than authoritative. Why are you doing this? We never threatened your worlds. We never even knew you existed until the Kelthara contacted you. What did we do to deserve this destruction? Admiral Hughes's response was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring every listening species heard her words. You enslaved innocent beings. You destroyed civilizations. You built your empire on the suffering of others. When someone asked us for help, we came. That is what we did. That is what we will always do. She paused, looking at the tactical display showing the remnants of the Vraxan fleet. You had a choice, Commander. You could have withdrawn from Kelthara space. You could have accepted our terms for peace. You chose to fight instead. Now, you face the consequences of that choice. Varthex had no response. His ship shuddered as another impact struck, systems failing across multiple decks. He realized with bitter clarity that he had underestimated these humans completely. They were not the primitive species the Kelthara broadcasts suggested. They were something far more dangerous. A civilization that combined advanced technology with moral conviction. The battle entered its final phase. Vraxan ships began surrendering in larger numbers, their crews realizing that continued resistance was suicide. Some ships tried to flee, jumping to faster than light speeds, but human fighters pursued them, disabling engines before they could escape. Ryan Brooks led his squadron in clearing the last pockets of resistance. His ship was heavily damaged, shields depleted, armor scorched from multiple hits, but the Valiant was still fighting, still protecting the ships around it. Nicole Patterson reported the final tally as the shooting stopped. Admiral, enemy fleet strength is down to less than 200 active ships. All of them are signaling surrender or attempting to withdraw. Our losses are 37 ships destroyed, 83 damaged, but operational. The numbers were sobering. 37 ships meant thousands of human lives lost, families who would receive notifications that their loved ones had died light years from Earth. But compared to Vraxan losses, humanity had won an overwhelming victory. Admiral Hughes opened a channel to all ships, human and Vraxan alike. Cease fire. All Vraxan vessels that have surrendered will be boarded and their crews taken into custody. Any ship that attempts to flee will be disabled. Any ship that attempts to continue fighting will be destroyed. This battle is over. She then directed her words to the Vraxan homeworld below. People of the Vraxan Collective, your government chose war over peace. Your military has been defeated. But we do not make war on civilians. Humanitarian aid will be provided. Your basic needs will be met. But your days of conquest are finished. On the planet's surface, billions of Vraxan watched their invincible military crushed by a species they had never heard of until weeks ago. Some felt rage. Others, relief. The Empire had brought them prosperity built on others' suffering. Now that bill was coming due. Supreme Commander Varthex's ship was boarded by human marines. He surrendered without resistance, too exhausted and broken to fight any longer. As he was led away in restraints, he asked the Marine commander one question: "What will you do with us? What happens to the Vraxan now?" The Marine, a veteran who had seen combat across human space, gave an honest answer: "That is not for me to decide. But if I know Admiral Hughes, you will." 3 months after the battle, the galaxy looked very different. The Vraxan Collective had dissolved, its territory divided among newly independent species who were learning what freedom meant after generations of oppression. Human diplomatic teams worked around the clock to help establish stable governments and peaceful relations between former enemies. Jake Morrison stood in what had been the Vraxan Command Center, now transformed into a coordination hub for the rebuilding effort. Representatives from 6 different species sat around tables, negotiating trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. It was messy, sometimes chaotic, but it was democracy in action. Councillor Venia had come from the Kelthara homeworld to participate in the formation of what they were calling the Interspecies Protection Alliance. She found Jake reviewing reports from the relief operations. "You look tired," she said, her translation device capturing the concern in her voice. Jake smiled. "We all are. Winning the war was the easy part. Building the peace is harder." Vania settled into a chair designed for human physiology, her longer limbs making it awkward but manageable. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for saving my people, but for showing us a different way to exist in the galaxy. Before you came, we thought survival required either domination or submission. You proved there is a third option. Cooperation backed by the willingness to fight for what is right." Jake pulled up a holographic display showing the Alliance territory. 12 species had joined so far, with more expressing interest. "The hard part is making sure this lasts," he said. "Making sure that 20 years from now, some other empire does not rise up to replace the Vraxan. We need to build something strong enough to deter aggression, but flexible enough to respect each species' autonomy." On Earth, President Jennifer Cole addressed the United Assembly in Geneva. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation and colony, all wanting to hear about humanity's first major interstellar conflict. "We sent our fleet across the stars to answer a distress call from beings we had never met," she said. Some questioned whether we should involve ourselves in alien conflicts. Some worried about the cost in lives and resources. But history has shown us that evil triumphs when good people do nothing. She pulled up images from the liberated worlds, showing former slaves rebuilding their civilizations with human assistance. "We lost good people in this conflict. 37 ships and their crews, over 4,000 individuals who gave their lives so that strangers could be free. We honor their sacrifice by ensuring it was not in vain. Earth will continue to stand against tyranny, wherever we find it." The Assembly voted unanimously to expand the Space Force and commit resources to the Interspecies Protection Alliance. Humanity had found its role in the galaxy, and Earth's population supported it. Admiral Karen Hughes retired 6 months after the battle, having accomplished what she set out to do 30 years earlier: prepare humanity for its place among the stars. She spent her final day in uniform at the memorial dedication ceremony on Mars. where a monument was built to honor those who fell in the Vraxan War. The monument was a simple black stone wall, with names carved into it. Every human who had died was listed, along with their ship and rank. Above the names, in multiple languages including Kelthara and several others, was a single phrase: "They came when called." Ryan Brooks attended the ceremony in his new role as Fleet Admiral. Having been promoted to replace Hughes, he stood before the wall with Nicole Patterson, now a commander with her own ship, and they read names of friends they had lost. "Do you think it was worth it?" Nicole asked quietly. Ryan was silent for a moment, thinking about the question. He thought about the Kelthara children who would grow up free, the liberated slaves learning to live without fear, the new alliance forming to prevent future atrocities. "Yes," he said finally. "Every life we lost mattered, but so did every life we saved. We made a choice to be the kind of species that helps, that protects, that stands up when others cannot. That choice defined us." Back in the former Vraxan territory, the rebuilding continued. Former Vraxan officials who had committed war crimes faced justice in tribunals overseen by representatives from multiple species. Some were imprisoned, others faced lesser penalties depending on their level of involvement. The trials were fair, documented, and transparent, showing everyone that justice meant accountability, not revenge. The general Vraxan population struggled with their new reality. For generations, they had been taught that their empire was destined to rule the galaxy, that conquest was their birthright. Now they had to learn to exist as equals among species they had once dominated. It was not easy. There were protests, resistance movements, attempts to restore the old order. But human peacekeepers and alliance security forces maintained stability while Vraxan society went through its painful transformation. A new generation of Vraxan leaders emerged, younger individuals who had seen the cost of their empire's policies and wanted something different. They worked with alliance advisors to build a government based on cooperation rather than domination. Lisa Harper, now commanding the UES Sovereign as part of the Alliance patrol fleet, watched this transformation with cautious optimism. She had seen too much of war to believe in quick solutions, but she also saw genuine change happening. Chloe Martinez commanded a training facility where officers from Alliance species learned human military doctrine. The key lesson she emphasized was the difference between strength and aggression, between defensive capability and offensive conquest. "Power is not inherently good or bad," she told a class of mixed-species officers. "It is a tool. What matters is how you use it and why. We humans have made terrible mistakes in our history. We have used power for conquest and oppression, but we learned that such uses ultimately destroy the user as much as the victim. Real strength comes from protecting others, from using your capabilities to build rather than destroy." The students, representing 7 different species, absorbed these lessons with varying degrees of comfort. Some came from warrior cultures and understood immediately. Others, like the Kelthara, struggled with the concept of necessary violence. But all of them recognized that the old way of galaxy-wide politics was finished. Ambassador Xylus, of the Confederation of Free Worlds, became humanity's strongest advocate among the established galactic powers. His government had watched the Vraxan War with growing respect for human capabilities and values. He met with Jake Morrison on the Kelthara homeworld during an Alliance summit, walking through gardens that had been rebuilt after the Vraxan bombardment. "Your species has changed the galaxy in less than a year," Xylus said. "Some of the older powers are nervous about that. They worry about what happens when humanity decides to expand its influence." Jake had heard these concerns before. "We are not interested in building an empire. We want to be part of a community where species respect each other's rights and help each other when needed." Xylus made a gesture that his translator rendered as amusement. "That is what worries them. You offer protection without demanding tribute. You help without seeking control. It makes humanity either the best ally possible or the most dangerous competitor. Your model threatens every government built on exploitation." Jake understood the implication. "So they are worried we will inspire their subject populations to demand better treatment?" "Exactly. Xylus confirmed. You have shown that a powerful military can exist to protect rather than conquer. That idea is revolutionary. It will reshape galactic politics for generations. On Earth, the cultural impact of First Contact was enormous. Schools taught about the Kelthara and other Alliance species. Artists created works inspired by alien cultures. Scientists collaborated with their counterparts from other worlds on projects that would have been impossible alone. But there was also a somber recognition of what war meant. The families of those lost in the conflict mourned their loved ones, while taking pride in what they had died for. Memorial services became common, ensuring that the cost of humanity's values was never forgotten. Jake Morrison returned to Earth for the first anniversary of the initial distress call. He stood in the same facility where he and Lisa Harper had first decoded the Kelthara message, remembering how it had all started with a desperate plea from strangers. 1 year ago, humanity had faced a choice. Ignore the call and remain isolated, or answer it and accept all the consequences that would follow. They had chosen to answer, and that choice had led to war, loss, and ultimately to a new role in the galaxy. He thought about Venia's question, the one that still haunted him sometimes. Was it worth it? Venia's well. Venia's well too. Venia's well. Venia's well too. Venia's well. He thought about the 12 species now part of the Alliance, living in peace and cooperation. He thought about the children across multiple worlds who would grow up in a galaxy where might did not automatically make right, where the strong had a responsibility to protect the weak. He thought about the monument on Mars, the names carved in stone, the thousands who had given everything so that strangers could be free. Yes, he decided. It was worth it. Not because the cost was small, but because the alternative was unacceptable. Humanity could have stayed home, could have let the Vraxen continue their conquest, could have pretended that others' suffering was not their concern. But that would not have been humanity. That would not have been the species that sent rescue missions into disasters, that established laws against genocide, that believed in rights and dignity for all people, regardless of origin. The galaxy had learned what humans were capable of when pushed to war. Now it was learning what humans were like in peace, determined to build something better, committed to protecting those who needed protection, and willing to sacrifice for principles they held sacred. The Kelthara had sent an SOS expecting nothing. They got humanity's full commitment to their survival and freedom. That distress call had changed the galaxy, and there was no going back. Admiral Ryan Brooks, in his office at Earth Defense Command, looked at reports from across Alliance space. Trade was flourishing. Cultural exchanges were common. Species that had been enemies under Vraxen rule were learning to be neighbors, sometimes even friends. There were still problems, still conflicts that needed mediation, still groups that resisted the new order. Building a lasting peace was not a single battle, but an ongoing campaign, requiring patience, diplomacy, and occasional shows of force to deter those who mistook restraint for weakness. But the foundation was solid. The Apex Armada had broken the old system of galactic politics. Now, the real work continued, proving that a better system could take its place. Captain Chloe Martinez sat in a briefing room with her mixed species officer corps, planning patrol routes through Alliance space. It was routine work, the kind of unglamorous duty that rarely made headlines but kept the peace day after day. Remember, she told her team, our job is not to look for fights. It is to prevent them. Show the flag. Let everyone know that Alliance space is protected, that aggression has consequences, but also show that we are here to help, not to dominate. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant attention and adjustment, but it was working. Slowly, carefully, the Alliance was building something that had never existed in this region of space. A community of species based on mutual respect and shared security. The story of humanity's arrival in the galaxy would be told for generations. Different species would emphasize different aspects. The Kelthara would remember the salvation that came from an unexpected source. The Vraxen would remember the consequences of unchecked aggression, and the liberated slaves would remember hope, arriving in the form of human warships. But the core message was universal. When someone asks for help, some species answer that call, and when humanity answers, they bring everything they have, because they believe that all life has value worth protecting. The Apex Armada had won the war. Now, the Alliance was winning the peace, one day at a time, proving that the values humanity fought for could actually work in practice. And across the galaxy, on dozens of worlds, the phrase, "they came when called," became synonymous with hope. I'll get exactly what you deserve. Justice, not revenge. Accountability, not destruction. You will have to rebuild, make amends, prove that you can exist without preying on others. The Marine paused, looking at the defeated commander. Your empire is finished, but your species is not. What happens next depends on the choices you make going forward. As the human fleet secured the Vraxen home system, news of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Every species within range received the broadcasts, saw the footage, understood the implications. A new power had arrived in the galaxy. One that did not conquer for resources or territory. One that fought to protect those who could not protect themselves. One that would travel across the stars to answer a distress call from strangers. The age of unchecked aggression was over. Humanity had announced its presence, and the message was clear. The strong had a responsibility to protect the weak, not exploit them. Any species that forgot that lesson would face the same fate as the Vraxen. The Apex Armada had fulfilled its mission. Now came the harder work of building a peace that would last. The Vanguard, led by Ryan Brooks, accelerated directly toward the Vraxen center, drawing their fire and attention. The two flanking groups, commanded by Chloe Martinez and Lisa Harper, swept wide in pincer movements. The dreadnoughts, UES Armageddon and UES Devastator, anchored the center formation. Their massive weapons reaching across millions of kilometers to target Vraxen command ships. Fighter squadrons deployed, creating screens against Vraxen missiles while their own smart munitions found gaps in enemy formations. The battle for the Vraxen homeworld had begun, and the galaxy held its breath waiting to see which vision would prevail. The Empire, built on conquest, or the Alliance built on protection. Tell your admiral that the Kelthara support her plan. We will defend our world while you take the battle to the enemy. And when this is over, we will help you build a galaxy where species like the Vraxen cannot prey on the innocent. Rax in ride. We have given Vraxen axe in ride. Jake returned to the Retribution and delivered Venia's message. Admiral Hughes nodded, having expected nothing less. She began issuing orders, preparing the Apex Armada for its next mission. Earth sent reinforcements, bringing the fleet strength to 400 warships. Among the new arrivals were 2 experimental dreadnoughts, massive vessels designed specifically for fleet combat. The UES Armageddon and UES Devastator joined the formation, their weapons capable of engaging multiple targets across vast distances. As the fleet prepared to depart, Ryan Brooks took a moment to look back at the Kelthara homeworld. He had grown fond of these people, their gentle culture and their determination to rebuild. He hoped they would remember humanity not just as warriors, but as friends who came when called. The Apex Armada jumped toward Vraxen space, leaving a strong garrison behind to protect the Kelthara. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided that enough was enough. Admiral Hughes, on behalf of all Kelthara, I thank you. We asked only to be remembered. You have given us our lives back. Please, come to our world. You and your people will forever be welcome here. As the Retribution moved into orbit around the Kelthara homeworld, Jake Morrison looked out at the planet below. It was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents, cities that glowed in the night. A living world, full of art and music and children who would now have a future. He thought about the Vraxen ships still burning in space, the lives that had ended in those 18 minutes. Part of him felt sick at the violence, but another part, a deeper part, knew that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to hit it so hard it never got back up. Humanity had made its introduction to the galaxy. The message was clear. We came in peace, but we brought our guns, just in case. We have received a distress call from beyond our solar system. An innocent civilization is being destroyed by an empire built on cruelty and conquest. They asked us for help, not knowing what we would do, not knowing what we could do. Today, humanity answers that call. We will not offer words. We will not negotiate. We will not debate. We will act. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Apex Armada launches in 6 weeks. Any species that preys on the weak, any empire built on suffering, any force that believes might makes right, will learn what humanity truly is. We are not conquerors. We are not invaders. But when someone cries for help, we answer. Cries invaders, and we answer with everything we have. Across Earth and all its colonies, the response was immediate. Shipyards went into full production. Reserves were activated. Weapons that had been theoretical became real. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first time humans looked at the stars and wondered if we were alone. Now we knew. We were not alone. And that meant we had a choice to make about what kind of neighbors we would be. The Kelthara had sent an SOS, expecting nothing. They were about to discover what happens when humanity decides that nothing is unacceptable.